Welcome to the NonProfit Voice, a podcast series brought to you by NonProfit Pro, the go-to resource for nonprofit management and strategy. In each episode, we're going to sit down with leaders of nonprofit organizations, the people responsible for paving the way for our sector, along with key technology strategy partners who are transforming our industry. Here at the NonProfit Voice, we'll have refreshing conversations in which we will all learn more about the convergence of nonprofit and technology. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website to find more episodes of the NonProfit Voice. And you can download all of the NonProfit Voice episodes on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. We will have all the links down below. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the NonProfit Voice. I'm Nhu Te, Editor-in-Chief of NonProfit Pro, and I'll be your host for today's episode. And as always, thank you so much for joining us today. So join me in welcoming Pamela Fertel Weinstein, VP of Marketing and Communications at Birthright Israel Foundation, and Brett Meyer, founder of Impact Upgrade. Hey guys, how are you both doing today?
Doing great.
Great, thanks. You?
Doing pretty good. I can't complain. All right, so before we jump into today's topic, I kind of want to get started with introducing you guys to our audience. So Pamela, I'll have you go first. Can you tell us more about your background, how you found yourself at Birthright Israel Foundation, and more about the organization itself?
Happy to. I have spent the last 20 years working in marketing and advertising in the for-profit and nonprofit world. And about 8 years ago, time flies so fast, I can't keep up. I was looking for a real change, and I felt burnt out, and I was trying to find something that would feel a little bit more rewarding to me. And Birthright Israel Foundation is the nonprofit fundraising arm in the United States that raises money for the Birthright Israel program, which is a 10-day gift of an educational trip to young Jewish adults ages 18 to 26 to Israel. And I actually went on the very first round of trips when I was in college in the year 2000. And when I saw they were looking to hire for their communications team, I had a really personal connection to the organization and thought, what a better way to take my skills to do something that actually mattered and felt good at the end of the day. So that's how I ended up at Birthright Israel Foundation. I just celebrated my 8th anniversary, and there's nowhere else I'd want to be.
Oh, that's awesome. And Pamela, you and I have talked before for last year's, I think just around this time, we talked about a little bit about email segmentation for NPP's cover story. And I've told you how great of an organization I think Birthright is. I have I've heard a lot of great things because my fiance now has been, and all of his friends have gone. And every time we talk about it, they explain what a wonderful experience it was for them as young Jewish adults.
That's great to hear.
I'm very happy to have you on again. And Brett, of course, tell us more about yourself and the organization that you found.
Sure. So again, it's Brett Meyer. A lot of us are located here in Fort Wayne, but Impact Upgrade is actually a remote company. So we have folks kind of around the US and internationally. But we are a software engineering and kind of digital operations and consulting company that solely focus on helping and serving nonprofits. Everything we do tends to fall into one of a couple buckets, one being pretty standard software engineering, tackling big insurmountable challenges and doing software solutions both for actual program operations as well as back office things. And then the other arm is more of a subscription service where we come in as CTOs, analysts, administrators, support people, basically an entire IT team to serve nonprofits just as if you were to hire us. Everything we do is focused on long-term relationships. So we're here just to solve problems, connect the dots, make sure that staff members are able to focus on what's important and not be distracted by all of the tedious, repetitious, burdensome things that tend to happen in the office over time. So it's kind of hard to describe. If it's digital or operations, the answer is yes. We're here as partners, and there is absolutely no typical day.
Well, that sounds fun, and it keeps things interesting, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So I've asked both Pamela and Brett to join me today in a conversation about email segmentation. So today you can look forward to a discussion about segmentation best practices, difference between different lists, good hygiene practices, and of course, so much more. So let's get into my first question. And Brett, I'll have you kick us off. So what's your advice for a nonprofit organization that is segmenting its list for the very first time? What's your advice on how they can do so, and what are their options?
I would say start slowly. A lot of times what we see are organizations trying to do too much at once. We've always said the premature optimization is the root of many evils, and it's easy to get into the weeds with this. If you're able to at least start with segmenting your list to, if nothing else, an audience specifically for marketing and an audience specifically for donors, right out of the gate, you'll be ahead of where a lot of organizations start from the beginning. That checks a lot of boxes when it comes to security and liability and regulatory things that need to be, those boxes need to be checked before you can do anything, especially in the marketing realm. But it also gives you separation of concerns so that you're able to focus on marketing, focus on things like transactional receipts, and not use a single bucket. So that's a great place to start. I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about this in detail later, but I would also say try not to use email platforms and segmentation as like a CRM platform. Definitely treat it as a dumb pipeline for emails, and use something else to power the segmentation on top of that. And I think if I remember correctly, we'll probably dive into detail on that later.
Awesome. And Pamela, do you have anything to add to what Brett has said?
Absolutely. I think starting small and slow is the absolute best way to begin. Sometimes when you look at your list size, it can be very overwhelming. But I think the key thing to remember when you're starting this process is nonprofit organizations are all about relationships with your donors, with your audience, whether it's a direct marketing audience or it is people that are giving 5-6 figure gifts that you've had at events and you've socialized with and engaged with on a personal level. It's all about relationships. So take a step back, think, how do you usually communicate with these people? How connected are they to your organization? Is it a matter of just separating it by giving levels? Years, that they've been supporting the organization. Starting off very small, and then you can start to pay attention to how they act and behave with your communications, and you can develop it further down the road. But I think starting first off is just the relationship. Are you newly dating? Are you just meeting for a first date, or are you in a long-term committed relationship?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with starting small. I think it can, Pamela, like you said, it can be overwhelming for nonprofits who are just starting, for the first time. So I kind of want to piggyback off that, Pamela, and kind of, ask you, what is Birthright Foundation doing? There are so many opportunities to segment lists in so many different ways. So, what are your insights on that?
I think, we like to approach it, like I had said, talked about a relationship. It's how are we getting these emails? How do we know these people? And what is their connection to the organization? So first and foremost, on a very simple level, we have our participants, which once they come back, we communicate to them as alumni. So that is one way we look at our audience and one list that we segment to. We speak to them very differently than we would to someone who is older and who's been donating to our organization for years. We're looking at those alumni just to introduce ourselves, let them know when they're home from their experience in Israel that we exist, that we are the organization that has helped to make their gift possible, and just stay connected with them and learn about their experience over time. Another way we look at it is also we have parent data. So we're able to talk to parents of our participants in a different way, talking about their child's experience, connecting to them on a personal level of what they've seen this program do for their children. Then we look at our portfolio donors, which we would call our major gift donors. They have a completely different track, and we try to not talk to them from a mass marketing approach through email as often as we would people that come through direct marketing, and really look at them on a more personal level. Do their emails need to come from a specific fundraiser? Is that how they're going to open and engage? Every once in a while, it's important for them to hear from the president, putting them on lists for different holidays, different cultivation messages. It's really looking at how we're connected to these people, how they've come into our system, and trying to continue that relationship and then slowly elevate them into a different category.
Awesome. And Brett, I know you guys work with a lot of different nonprofits. What have you seen work for your clients?
Yeah, I think I would echo everything Pamela said, that the messaging is super important. Custom tailoring it to an audience is incredibly important. And anything that you can do to be data driven with that is super helpful. The organizations we see that are most successful with these strategies tend to use a deeply analytical approach. You've already got something like a CRM or your financial records, your past marketing records showing other touch points. How do you feed that into your segmentation strategy so that you can do everything Pamela just said, but in a way that is more automated and powered by data that you already have? Otherwise, everything that was described, who are my top donors, who's most likely to give to X, Y, and Z, who had this happen in their past. If you don't have kind of the automated way of doing it, that implies a ton of manual work, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of importing and exporting, a lot of manual clicks. The successful ones are the ones that have some sort of strategy to automate all of that from something else. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Pamela, you know, in your previous response, you talked about a lot of ways Birthright is using segmented lists, and I was wondering if either of you could kind of expand on that and share additional examples on how to use different lists for different communications.
Absolutely. I think one of the beauties of data, that's, coming from me as the marketing person who likes to be creative, but I've grown to really love email data and really enjoy getting to know the ins and outs of it. I think it's so important to talk to people based on how they're engaging with you. So if you look at your list size, I'm going to use easy math. And let's say you have 10,000 emails that you could send to on any given day that are all within legal ramifications. They've all opted in. Nobody's tried to opt out and unsubscribe. They've had no bounce rate issues. But you're looking at this list and you're saying, okay, who's actively opening emails? Who's engaging with us? You're going to want to talk to that group separately. You know that they have some kind of commitment or interest in your organization. So you would like to bucket them in their own active list. You may be more likely to solicit them for a gift over email sooner than somebody that hasn't really engaged with you. And then when you look at the list and say, these email addresses are clean and these email addresses have opted in, but they're not opening and they're not engaging with us, you don't want to necessarily throw them into the mass list, because that could also impact some of your open rates and your spam folder issues. But find a creative way to talk to that audience using creative subject lines and messaging that maybe you might get them to reactivate and all of a sudden open an email for the first time in several months, and then slowly have a different pathway for them to engage with your organization before you throw them into the general pool. I think it's very important to really, even though you're looking at list sizes, 10,000, 500, 100,000, whatever your number may be, each email is associated with a person. And think about how you want that person to feel when they saw your email come in their inbox.
Oh, that's a wonderful way of putting it. You really emphasize relationships in our conversation so far. So I like that, when you're talking about communications and messaging, each message, it's to a person. So I think thinking in that particular way is very helpful for nonprofits, right? Because it's relatable.
Exactly.
Brett, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, not only is it relational, but this day and age, people are so used to noise, just constant noise from every direction. Your email, the news, just anything, social media, anything that you can do to emphasize an individual message that is custom tailored to them to stick out from that noise and kind of make yourself stand out. So a lot of times we'll see things like, don't just base it off of things like donor levels. Make it a little bit more contextual or situational specific. If you have an email that you want to send out that pertains to a specific location that you have operations in, having tags available so that you can segment based off of who has a record of giving to this specific location. So say you've got a series of homes with kids. We do a lot with anti-trafficking organizations. There's a lot of donors that give to specific countries. So having as much of that data as possible to provide contextual segmentation is super important. And we also see the use of timeliness. If you have something like analytics coming from social media or from donations, and this contact is, quote, hot based off of something they recently did. They interacted with us based off of a social media campaign. They gave soon after. If you have some of those contextual clues, it's really helpful to also have segmentation based off of who has recently interacted with us and who is most likely to engage with us over email because of steps they've recently done in other touch points.
And Brett, when it comes to email lists, I think it's a good rule of thumb to have really good data hygiene practices. What are your recommendations for nonprofits?
One thing we really frequently see is the overuse of audiences. Let's use MailChimp as an example. You have a breakdown of an audience, which is a bucket of people, and then you have tags within that. And the tags are what are supposed to define these segments. A lot of the data hygiene issues come into play where you might instead use multiple audiences in place of where you should be using a tag. So again, let's use the anti-trafficking as an example. If you have multiple locations where you do operations, you might have that one country as an audience, another country as another audience. That becomes a massive issue when it comes to things like opt-outs, because when you opt out, you're opting out of a specific audience, not just your overall MailChimp account. So because of that, it's really important to make sure that you're using a very limited number of buckets. I mentioned a marketing bucket and a donor bucket. The marketing bucket is where you send all announcements, all outreach, everything that is not specifically pertaining to a donation that they just did, like a receipt. And then using tags or groups inside of that single audience to make sure that you're not spreading yourself too thin with your data. We also we see the overuse of something like MailChimp as a CRM instead of pairing it with something that is actually supposed to be a donor management system, regardless if that's Salesforce or HubSpot or any of the nonprofit focused CRMs. Let that database or that CRM be your overall source of truth for everything data. Don't try to do too much of that in your email pipeline, because again, then you end up with duplicate data. It's hard to act appropriately. You're spread really thin, and it's just you're inserting chaos into something that should be just a really simple pipeline that you're sending messages through.
Yeah, I think everything Brett just said is spot on. In addition to what I had mentioned before about making sure you're communicating to the right list at the right time, a really important thing is to also communicate if you have a fundraising staff that is managing donor relationships. Very often they come to you to send out emails, whether it's for invitations to events, a gala, joining people on a mission, communicating important board updates, programmatic updates. And sometimes they'll come to you surprised. I didn't know that. How come my donor didn't get this email? We sent this out. They said they never got it. And it's also, educating staff that they have to pay attention to their personal relationship donors that are not part of the mass marketing world to see if they've opted out. Communicating to somebody and say, we're getting a bounce back a lot and we're trying to communicate to this donor. Do they have an updated email address? Making sure you're communicating with your staff that if they're owning the relationship and the data that's living in your Salesforce record on an account, to make sure that the email addresses that are clean. And sometimes people actually opt out by accident. Sometimes we've seen donors that have gotten emails that have been so excited about something and they forwarded on to their friends. And when you do that, if some friend gets an email and says, oh, I don't know why I got this, I don't want it, and they unsubscribe, they're actually unsubscribing the original person that you sent the email to, not the friend that it got forwarded to. So there are sometimes accidental unsubscribes from donors, even board members that don't realize they could have accidentally clicked on a button. So it's a matter of also paying attention to your high-level donors and people that you're managing on a different scale to make sure that their records are clean, because they're very important to your audience. into your organization. You want to make sure you're communicating to them just as well as you are when you're managing, looking at open and click rates and engagement for your mass marketing email lists as well.
Yeah. And, that brings up a great point about, like accidents or mistakes. They certainly can happen. And I'm sure, Pamela, Brett, you've heard horror stories of, for instance, setting support a thank you letter for their donation when they haven't made a recent donation, or thanking them for a monthly gift and they're not a monthly giver. Pamela, I'd love for you to chime in on this. How can nonprofits avoid mistakes like this? But when they do happen, what can they do to, lessen the impact?
I think it always goes back to paying attention to your data. And I think, Brett, you talked very well and about the importance of having an email platform that talks to your CRM. When they live in two different worlds and they're not connecting and talking, that leaves a lot of room for error. So for example, we use Pardot as our email provider, and that is 100% connected to Salesforce. So all of our transactions are updated in Salesforce and immediately noted in our Pardot account, but sometimes errors do happen. It's a matter of paying attention to them. If you have responses that are going to a general information at or contact us at inbox, make sure somebody's always monitoring that to make sure that any questions, complaints, concerns, issues that come through to that are answered immediately and handled correctly. Sometimes it's as simple as, a check came in the mail a day after the email was sent and it's communicating that. Sometimes people sign up for monthly gifts and they forget or they accidentally check the box. So it's a matter of knowing the information and communicating it back to them. And remember, these are people. These are not just email addresses. These are not just responses you're getting that are spam or bots. These are people that have supported you or engaged with you or signed up for your emails because they have some kind of connection or interest. So it's a matter of always responding, always managing expectations, clearly communicating with them. If you don't have the answer immediately, make sure you find out who the person is that has that answer, and always communicate back to these people quickly and professionally.
Love it. And Brett, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo all of that. It's obviously as much as you can automate and be data-driven, the less human-driven interactions you're doing, and the less manual data entry, the better. You reduce the need, or you reduce the possibility for errors as much as you can automate. I would also echo, again, they're humans receiving touch points, and this is an opportunity where if a mistake is made, to also make it known that the organization is full of humans. I feel like a lot of times nonprofits are so focused on being as professional as possible. A lot of times donors want to know that they're also working with humans on the other side and not just a big nebulous organization. And so not only is it an opportunity for you to be a human yourself, but it's yet another opportunity to have a touch point with that person, to check in, admit a mistake was made, but use that as an opportunity to have a conversation about other things going on, other ways they could be serving each other. So yeah, just kind of making the best out of the lemon that was handed to you.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to break down those walls sometimes, like so that that you're not just speaking or communicating to a robot, or it's just not automated messages being sent to you. So being able to talk to someone is nice, especially for nonprofits. All right, so we have covered a lot of ground today. So my question to either of you, Brett, Pamela, are there any important email segmentation, strategies, tactics, issues, challenges that we haven't covered today that you think we should?
I think I would just add, be creative. Don't be afraid to try new things, but don't be too against learning from your trying. I guess I'm trying to say that, especially today and living in such a virtual world, email has become such a common occurrence, and it's very easy to say, well, we're having a webinar or virtual something. We could cast a wider net. We have more email addresses to send to. Let's just send to everyone. In theory, that sounds great. You're not paying for printing for an invitation. You're not paying for postage. You're not taking the time for extra personal phone calls right off the bat. But take a look at that. If you send out an email and you're seeing that things aren't working well, don't be afraid to change course, because your data is the most important thing when it comes to your email campaigns and your email strategies. If you don't keep it healthy, you don't keep it clean, you're jeopardizing future campaigns that are down the pike. So just be open to trying new things, but be okay with learning that sometimes they don't always work, and you may need to pivot on a dime.
Great. And how about you, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, Pamela used the word creative. I think that's kind of front and center here, that organizations these days have so much data that could be used in so many different powerful ways, but often either don't have the ability to do that, or don't see the possible combinations that could be really helpful. So be really creative with how you're pushing in tags into your platform so that you can introduce segmentation that is super specific. If you have a really cool mix of locations and situations and donor levels and past interactions, I mean, anything that you can do to push that in there gives you the flexibility to be extremely narrowly scoped with your segmentation and have much higher conversion rates than you would if you just blasted it out to a lot of people. So first and foremost, be creative, and like Pamela said, give yourself permission to kind of experiment. I would also highlight, maybe not so much specific to segmentation, but just email audiences in general. We often see a couple blind spots where, there's new regulations in Europe, GDPR being one of the primary ones, where you have to be much more careful these days with how you are storing people's identifiable information, which includes their name and their email address. And that's where we start getting back into that conversation of a CRM and being spread too thin, of having too much data in too many different places. And in line with that, making sure that you're also doing a very explicit opt-in process into your marketing pipeline. It has to be opt-in. It cannot be opt-out. You cannot automatically, or at least you should not automatically, opt someone into a marketing list just because they donated. So these regulations continue to evolve. They seem to be accelerating. It's something to be very careful with. If nothing else, if you don't do it for the liability reasons, at least do it because it's a best practice. They're investing in you. You want to make sure that you're continuing to give the perception that you're doing the right thing with data. And that means having very carefully thought out practices when it comes to the security and privacy arena.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's like one of the most important things to consider, is making sure you're keeping with the guidelines and not overstepping, because that can be really bad for the nonprofit, just like liability wise. So that's such a great point. All right. So my last question, and this is something I ask to every guest that comes through on the Nonprofit Voice. Pamela, from everything that we discussed today, what's one piece of advice that you would give nonprofits?
I would say that people need to be aware that a person's inbox is their personal space. When you're looking at it compared to your mailbox outside the front of your house, when you get the quote unquote junk mail, you get the catalogs, the coupons, things you don't want, you walk into your house, you throw them in the garbage, and nobody's feelings are hurt. Nobody has to be told that they don't want something. Nobody is reported as spam. It just goes in the garbage, and then hopefully eventually that store or that restaurant or that company will stop sending you things in the mail if they get no response. But with email, it's a lot different. Now that emails are living on our phones, on our tablets, on our laptops, and we're watching TV and we're working off all of these devices, every time a phone beeps and chirps that there's an email, it's a different personal reaction and connection. So respect that it's a personal space, and make sure that you, as a nonprofit, people are connected to you because they care. And keep that relationship front and center. Every time you think you should send an email, every time you think you should hit resend, let's just send it one more time. Remember, there are people behind that. And is it worth them unsubscribing more than the chance that they might actually take you up on that offer, whether it's a solicitation, asking them to join an event? Just sometimes stop and pause. It's very easy to think just hit send in the way the email goes. Really weigh what your outcome is and what you're hoping to get, and is it worth having people unsubscribe instead of just not sending that email again.
Awesome. And Brett?
Yeah, I'd say two quick things. There's been a lot of talk recently that there's no such thing as a company these days that is not a tech company. And I think that the same is becoming the case with nonprofits, that gone are the days where you can have a box of index cards in the back of your office or a spreadsheet and make sense of everything. Organizations are very tech-centric these days, very data-centric. So make sure that you're using that to your advantage, being able to do very intelligent actions, intelligent decisions, and act upon that data, and give yourself as many tools as possible. But in addition to that, I'd also say make sure that you are being story-driven. Again, we continue to focus on how much noise there is in the world today, and anything that you can do to cut through that and present not the what, but the why. Why is it important that you give? Why is it important that you read more about our organization? Here's an incredibly impactful story, and really focus on that storytelling, not just using email as a simple transactional means or just a way to ask for money or something like that. Use it as another opportunity to cut through the noise with a really impactful story that grabs people's attention.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for sharing. Awesome. So that about wraps it up for today's episode. I first want to thank all of our listeners for listening in on our episode today. Brett, Pamela, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Nonprofit Voice and sharing your insights and expertise on email segmentation.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
So on behalf of Nonprofit Pro, we will see you in the next episode of the Nonprofit Voice. Have a great day.